You know, you've been doing this for a long time. You've been leading the revolution. You've been a leader before that. And I think people would want to know a bit more about, even as it's been contained in what you said, what sustains you? What makes you not only not give up, but continue to strive and develop the science and to struggle with the masses of people, to struggle with all of us who are following you, and just stating a willingness to struggle with all these masses to get into the one way out for them? And then also maybe say something, even as you've just covered a lot of it, to those people who are in this movement and those people who don't even know about it yet but need to be in this movement, of where are they going to get that inspiration, that courage, that conviction, that sustenance to really put it all on the line, as you just said, to really live and if necessary, make whatever sacrifice is required to bring about a world where humanity could really flourish?
Well, I mean, as the first part, the most fundamental thing in terms of anyone being sustained is having a scientific approach to reality, being grounded in that and consistently applying a scientific method and approach to understand the contradictions that you're up against, to understand the deeper driving forces of things, to understand that everything we've been talking about, all the horrors, are rooted in this system, and that there is a way to eliminate all this by uprooting and overthrowing this system and replacing it with something much better. So in most, the most important thing and the most basic thing is having that scientific method and approach, but it's not something you get once. You have to keep on struggling to apply it in a living way to a constantly changing reality, and to deepening your understanding of that scientific method, including learning from your mistakes, the things you did wrong, but also learning from what, the things you did right and what results that produced, and then building on that. So that's the most fundamental thing. As far as, more personal thing, I think it's the same as everybody else who's part of this. You come to see that this world is, first of all, intolerable, and second of all, that it's unnecessary. And once you see those two things, then you can't, not apply yourself to actually bringing about the change that's needed, the fundamental revolutionary change that's needed. It's just, again, the science keeps you grounded, keeps you going through all the difficulties and contradictions. But there's a basic stand that what the people in the world are being put through is completely intolerable and completely unnecessary. I mean, I could talk about some of my own personal development in this, but as I've said before, I consider myself extremely fortunate. I grew up in a city which, on the one hand, was an intellectual center. I grew up in a middle-class family. I lived in the Berkeley Hills, where all the better-off people live. And because of that, I was able to be exposed to a lot of, knowledge, but not just knowledge. A lot of intellectual curiosity was encouraged. And I was able to, have a lot of resources to read books, and, I used to go to, Shakespeare plays, and I went to plays by Leroy Jones too, and he was called Leroy Jones, But I had, was very, encouraged and was interested in a broad array of cultural and intellectual things. And I had the situation where I could do that because of how I grew up. But then, my life changed dramatically. I mean, for one thing, I'll give my parents credit, partly because my mom was religious, very religious. My dad was religious. My mom was very religious. They sent me to YMCA camp from the time I was 9 years old. And the one thing really good about that, or the one thing that really stands out, is that the YMCA in Berkeley, which is the one sponsoring the camp, was integrated. You go to the Y was integrated. You go to the camp that I went to for 5 years, it was integrated. And not just were there, for example, black people at the camp, but the cabins that you slept in, the group you were part of was integrated. So, I still remember, I won't say his full name, I remember one dude, Wesley, was in the cabin with me and his cousin, for the years I went there. And, to be honest, when I was a kid, I was kind of spoiled too, coming up, and they didn't like me that much, but I had some interactions with them that made an impression on me, like one time I got really homesick at camp, and I knew that some of these kids didn't like me very much, and so I kind of, when I think I was 9 or 10, I went and I threw myself down in my bunk in the cabin, and either Wesley or his cousin came in and started comforting me and saying, you're not that bad, you shouldn't feel that bad. People don't hate you that much, and it made me feel better. And it made a deep impression on me, and so did the whole thing of going to that camp. But, and then I went to middle school or junior high school, as it was called, and, there were very few black people there, but in 9th grade, my best friend, John, was black, and, we got pretty close. We did some singing stuff together and had a lot of fun together, and that had an impression on me. And then I considered, like, one of the great things about Berkeley was that it only has one public high school. And so when you go to that public high school, you're thrown together with everybody. Like, there was 3 junior highs when I went there. They're not there now in the same way. But it was Garfield, where I went to, which was overwhelmingly white, some Latinos, and about 25 black people. Then there was Willard and Burbank, where most of the Latinos and, large numbers of black people went, especially Burbank, which was in southwest Berkeley. And we all came together. At that time, the high school was like three years, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. We all came together. And I still remember my first day of high school. They had an orientation. And, if you came from Garfield, there was all this racist shit. And like, oh, man, you're going to go down to Berkeley High, and there are going to be all these black kids there from Burbank and Willard, and you're going to get your ass kicked and all this kind of stuff. And so, they had an assembly the first day for all the new students. And so I got there late. And I was looking for a seat, and I couldn't find. I mentioned this in my memoir, but I was looking for a seat, and I couldn't find a seat. And I'm walking all around looking for a seat, and then I went by this one guy who was kind of slouched against the wall like this, and his feet were sticking out. And I said, I don't want to get into any shit here, so I walked very gingerly around him. And as I did, he turned to me and said, "Hey, man, you stepped on my dogs." I didn't step on his feet at all, just to be clear. I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Yes, you did, man. You stepped on my dogs." And then that was all there was to it. Now, this dude, whose name was Odell, he and I became friends later on. We were in a singing group together when I was a senior in high school. I used to see him out in the hallway, because he didn't go to class all that much. But, he was creative. So I'd see him out in the hallway when I'm going to class, and I'd say, "Hey, Odell, what are you doing, man? How come you're not in class?" He'd say, "I'm writing songs." So, then he'd be writing songs for our group, I remember he had one that was called "Chuck is Good for You." It was all about, eating good food was good for you. But so, that was Odell, and you go through changes. At first, it's like, "You stepped on my dogs." And then we're in a singing group together, and they're telling me, "Hey, man, step back here a little bit. We don't want your white ass sticking out too much when we're doing our routines." So this is all part of the the really great experience you have. I had many experiences like this. I made a lot of friends. I didn't make friends to make a point. I made friends because I liked people. Some of them were white, some of them were Japanese, some of them were Latino, a number of them were black. But they were people I liked. I got to know them in sports. I got to know them in singing class and this kind of thing. They became my friends. You know what? Friends are people in your heart, okay? Mm-hmm. I don't mean something superficial. I got a bunch of black friends. I mean, these are people that are in your heart, okay? These people that, you go to their house and they come to your house and you talk all kinds of shit with each other about what's going on, and you talk on the phone back in those days. And I don't know what the fuck we talked about, but we talk about it for hours. So these are people in your heart. And then you see what people are being put through. Just, the daily shit and the bigger shit. And, my mom always taught me, as a good Christian, that you should care about other people. That's the kind of Christianity she was about. You should care about other people. So I cared about my friends, not just because my mom told me to, although that had an influence on me, but I cared about my friends because they were here. These are my friends, and you're doing all this shit. Plus, I loved the culture they were part of. I loved being in a singing group. I mean, I could get into old stories about that. You know, it was a lot of fun. You know, I can remember, I guess I am going to tell a story. I remember one time we went to Live Oak Park, which is the main park one of the main parks in Berkeley, and I could tell more stories about that, but we don't have time for that. And we were going to our group was going to do sing for a dance there. And we're walking, you know, past the basketball courts, getting ready to go into the auditorium and do the singing. And and our lead singer was my friend Sam. And a friend of his was playing basketball, and he's coming over to get a drink of water. And he says, "Sam, what the fuck are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I'm here to sing with my group." "You can't sing, Sam." "Yeah, I can, man." So then they had to do a Spaniel song. They had to have a sing-off. Guy challenged Sam to sing. So they did a verse and a half, and the other guy gave up because Sam could really sing. So, you know, this was all, you know, I love this. This was all part of, like, you know, something that, you know, just, made my life rich. And then you're going to tell me that you're going to do this and that to my friends. And then you're going to do this and that to all these other people that are just like my friends. I mean, Sam took me out to his house. We went out to East Oakland. He lived right at the edge of East Oakland, right by 98th Avenue, I think it is. And in those days, San Leandro was right next to East Oakland, and you didn't go in San Leandro if you were black back in those days. And there was a creek and a fence right by where Sam lived, and that was the dividing line. You know, you didn't go into San Leandro. Here's my friend Sam. He couldn't go into San Leandro. It was right across the creek because he'd get jumped on. So I'm saying, what kind of fucking world is this? So that was a big thing to me, you know. And then, you know, the civil rights movement was jumping off, and then, you know, more militant and revolutionary forces like the Black Panther Party came forward, and I was in college at that time. You know, I had recovered from a serious illness, and I had an ambition. I wanted to learn a whole bunch of languages. I wanted to be a Renaissance man, you know, be able to speak at least 5 or 6 languages and read literature in all these different languages, you know, and I was taking all kinds of literature courses, and I had a favorite professor who was Italian, you know, and all this kind of stuff. I was enjoying my time, but I also was still thinking about all these big things going on. And then the Black Panther Party came along. You know, and I was devastated by the death of Malcolm X, like a lot of people were, millions and millions of people, and more than that around the world. And the Black Panther Party came along, and, you know, well, I could go back, you know, just since you asked me this question, I'm going to get into it. You know, so I mentioned my friend Billy, you know, so about when I was still in college, but just, you know, maybe about 1965 or something, I was down at this rec center in Southwest Berkeley. It used to be called the Grove Rec Center, but it's not called Grove anymore. But I was down there, and my friend Billy was playing basketball. He was a great basketball player. And then, you know, after they finished up, he introduced me to this dude named Weasel, whose nickname was Weasel. And they'd played against each other in high school. You know, Weasel went to McClymonds High School in West Oakland, and Billy went to Berkeley High, and they played a great game. But unfortunately, McClymonds won, and our high school that Billy played for lost by 1 point in overtime. And it was a bitter thing, but they were friends, Billy and Weasel. So Billy and I talked a while, and then he introduced me to Weasel, and Weasel and I started talking. And, you know, Weasel was interested, as I was, in all this shit going on. So, you know, we kept on talking, and then he asked me to give him a ride home. So I gave him a ride home. And we went over to his house, and we stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning drinking coffee and talking with his mom, as well as him, of course. You know, the three of us talking about what was going on with black people in America and all the shit this imperialist ruling class was doing in Vietnam and the Congo and all this kind of stuff. I still remember that very vividly, this staying up till 2 in the morning. And then I hung out with Weasel for a while. And then one day he said to me, you know, there's going to be this cultural program going on at the community college in Oakland. I think it's called Merit now. And so he said, why don't you come on down there? It's an Afro-American cultural program. So I went down there, and, you know, I was, I think, one of 2 white people in the audience, but that was fine. And Bobby Seale turned out to be the MC. And he was hilarious. I mean, he could do great impressions of all kinds of people. He did an impression of Bill Cosby back in the day. he was down on Bill Cosby for doing I Spy, being a CIA agent, and he was mocking Bill Cosby, imitated John Kennedy, all this kind of shit. And I thought he was great, as an MC of this program. And so then the program ended, and I'm starting to leave, and this guy comes up to me, and he says, "Who are you, Socrates?" And I said, "No." And then it turned out it was Huey Newton. And then we started having a discussion about what's going on with black people, black liberation, revolution. And he said to me, "Are you part of the CP?" Because he's trying to figure out why I was there. First, he wanted to know if I was Socrates. Then he wanted to know if I was in the CP. "Are you in the Communist Party?" And I said, "No." "That's good. They're not revolutionary." "Are you in Progressive Labor Party?" I said, "No." He said, "That's good. They pretend to be revolutionary, but they're not revolutionary either." And then we got into a discussion, and he was running down about how revolution could succeed, especially for black people in America, because although they might be a minority in America, at least 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the world was with them. So it's possible they could make revolution here. And that was, somewhat naive. It wasn't a fully developed scientific approach, but it made an impression on me, and this whole discussion made an impression on me. And then I was working at Ramparts magazine, and Eldridge Cleaver got out of prison on the basis of getting a job at Ramparts. So we were talking all the time, and I used to go over to his house, and as I mentioned, I talked to him on the phone sometime. And, and this just got me, much deeper into understanding that we needed a revolution. And I just bring it to a close by saying none of the things that I've mentioned that propelled me in this direction have gotten better. It's not that, there's more black middle class, there's more women able to do this and that, but these terrible forms of oppression, not just to people, the whole Vietnam War thing, all the atrocities that you learned about, I took that war very seriously. I took time to make up my mind. When I was in the free speech movement, we had a sit-in in the administration building for a couple of days and finally won our demands. But all the leaders of it, or almost all of them, were against the Vietnam War. And I remember Mario Savio, the main leader, got up and talked about what the administration was doing against us was the same type of thing that our government was doing in Vietnam. And I kind of didn't like that because I wasn't sure, how I felt about Vietnam. But I was studying. I was going into the library, and I was reading up on all the different, things that were being analyses about Vietnam, and I was reading about the commission that was set up to oversee the situation in Vietnam, International Commission, and they were reporting that it was the U.S. side that was violating all the agreements. These kind of things are going around in my mind, and I'm thinking and studying and everything. And then, as I've said a number of times, I woke up in the spring of 1965. Got the newspaper, and here's this great big article about Selma, Alabama, and the Pettus Bridge and the attack on the civil rights marchers, and that was it for me. I said, how in the fuck can these people, this government that claims it's bringing freedom to the people of Vietnam and getting rid of these terrible communist tyrants, how in the fuck can they be bringing freedom to the people in Vietnam? Why would they even be trying to do that when look what they're doing in this country and look what the government is allowing to go on right here? And that was it for me. So, all these things came together, but none of this has gotten better. If anything, it's gotten worse. The environment, the whole thing of the environment was just starting, the environmental danger and crisis was just beginning to be recognized at that time. Some people saw where things were headed. But it's gotten obviously worse over decades, and it's accelerating all the time. And, the danger of nuclear war, all these things have not gotten better. And, the people that I care about, that I've learned about, not just the people I grew up with, but the people around the world that I've learned to care about, when I've learned about their situation. To me, for me to give up would be betraying all those people. It'd be like turning your back on your best friends. So it's fundamentally the science that's the foundation, and that you need to keep deepening and applying and grasping and learning, or else you will go off course. But there's also a thing, but I think everybody who gets into this revolution feels that right here you feel like, what people are being put through, you just can't go along with it. You just can't stand by and watch it happen. You can't live with yourself if you don't do everything you can, especially when you know it's unnecessary and a better world actually is possible. You can't give up. Yes, you can get discouraged. You know, when there's defeats, when there's setbacks, big ones, you know, gigantic ones, like when China went off the socialist road, was taken off the socialist road, and the revolution was betrayed there, and capitalism was restored, and it's emerged as an imperialist power instead of a revolutionary stronghold for the people of the world. Those things are discouraging, but you bear down with the science, and you keep in your heart why you got into this in the first place, and what it is you're in this for. And that's why I don't give up. So that's what I would say about that.